All right, so what I want you to do is on your brain pop sheet that you have exchanged, so you now have somebody else's brain pop for you. You use the highlighter to select the right answer if they got it incorrect. If they got it correct, just leave it alone, okay? All right, number one. This could be answered by looking, or if you just thought about what Pangea looked like and how the continents moved apart, or they showed you on a map at the beginning of the video. The answer is B, South America moved west, which is to the left. So when Pangea broke apart, South America went left, that's west. Number two, what evidence did Alfred Wegener use to support his theory? He used fossils, A. Number three, what is true of tectonic plates? It is A, they are constantly moving. Just a little bit every year. The video said about as fast as your fingernails grow. That's not very fast. Saw a lot of y'all yesterday. It moves about as fast as your fingernails grow. And you're like, all right, number four, where is Earth's heat energy most concentrated? This means, where is it the hottest? And the answer is C, the core. Number five, which of the following best describes the location of the mantle? It is C, between the crust and the core. Mantle in the middle. Number six, what is the underlying force that drives plate tectonics? So what causes the plates to move? And that is B, convection currents. A lot of these you could have answered without even seeing the video. Number seven, which of the following is true of Earth's land masses? It is A, they are the upper part of the crust. Makes sense. Land masses are what we stand on. We stand on the crust. We're on top. Number eight, convection currents are powered by C, heat. Number nine, which of the following plate interactions is most likely to form? Mountain range, which just happened to be one of our warm-up questions pretty much as well. The answer is C, convergent boundaries between continental plates. You literally could have eliminated all the rest of them because none of them talked about convergent boundaries except for that one. And number 10, the two plates that differ in what collide, volcanoes often form nearby, and this is density. Doesn't matter how thick it is, how fast they're moving. It depends on how dense they are. All right, I want you to give that paper back to the person you exchange it with. Hold on to this paper. This is going to be used as part of your studying. So if you need to put it in your notebook so you don't lose it, whatever you got to do, but you need to hold on to it. All right, the next thing we're going to do is a cute little reading selection. I printed this out so that it folds up like a book. So when you fold it, the one that says a bird with many beaks at the top, that's your front. So it's going to look like this. What I want you to do is just read through it one time. Don't think about it too much. You're just going to read through it one time, and then I'll tell you what to do next. you've read through it one time, put your head down, let me know you're done. All right, go ahead and pause. A lot of you are almost there. A few of you are already done. This reading section, first of all, is small for a reason. You will see there's a method to my madness in just a little bit. This section is all about the guy who really came up with the theory of evolution. That's Charles Darwin. Most of y'all have at least heard his name before. But he traditionally was not a scientist to begin with, but he liked nature, he made observations, and became more of a scientist as he went on to make these discoveries. about changes in these birds in these set of islands. And he was extremely accurate and methodical about his observations, so much that we take evolution, it is a theory, but most of us are able to see it as proof that there's been changes in organisms over time, and not just with these birds, but using fossil records to compare anatomy of organisms that died a long time ago to organisms that are alive today, and see that there has been changes. And he has talked about why animals have to change and why some die out and don't change. All right, so with your highlighter, we're going to be practicing selective highlighting. From what Miss Aka has told me is that you guys are pretty good at it, but some of you still like to highlight the whole paragraph sometimes. The idea of selective reading is to basically pick out the parts that are most important out of a text, right? That's what highlighters do. But the idea is that when you go back and read just the highlighted parts, you get an idea of what the article is about just from reading those few words. So we eliminate all the words we don't need, and we concentrate on the stuff we do need. So starting on the first page, let me bring up the right screen. There we go. And mine is bigger just because, one, I'm old, and two, so you can see it on the screen a little better. All right, let's look at the first paragraph. First sentence. What's something that you would highlight out of that first sentence that you think is important? Give me a word or a couple words. Develop the theory. Let's include of evolution on there. Develop the theory of evolution. Who developed the theory of evolution? Charles Darwin. So you might want to highlight his name too. So if I just read the highlighted part out of that sentence, Charles Darwin developed the theory of evolution. That's literally all I need to know out of that sentence. The rest is just filler to make it more readable. Where did he do his studies at? Where did he make his observations at? Galapagos Islands. Yep. All right, that's pretty much all I need to know. At the Galapagos Islands, he came up with a theory of evolution. Who was he? Charles Darwin. All right, next few sentences talks about what he did, and it gives a lot of details in there. So we looked at birds. We looked at 13 different species. There were finches, great. He talked about how the size and shape of their beak were different, and then he goes to describe. So I don't really need to know all that right now. Those are just details. What I do need to know is what he came up with to make this theory of evolution. So give me maybe a sentence out of that paragraph that would sum up how he came up with that theory. Anybody find the sentence that could help figure out why he thought about the theory of evolution? Why did he come up with that? Maybe something that has a scientific word in it. A lot of you aren't even looking at your paper, so I hope you come up with an idea. If not, you should still be looking. Okay. Hypothesized what? Okay. So let's highlight that. Species all came from common ancestor. So that's his theory. Charles Darwin, he developed the theory of evolution at the Galapagos Islands. He said species all came from a common ancestor. That's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16 words out of that whole paragraph that we just summarized pretty much everything we need to know. The rest of it is great to know, but when it comes to studying, you don't need to read all of that. It's too much. Keep track of the important parts. All right, next paragraph. This talks about what he's observing about the bird species. So one thing that you need to know is something that Darwin noticed. Each of these species occupied separate islands in the Galapagos. What part of that do you think I need to highlight? I agree. All right. They were on separate islands. Why was it significant to note? What does the next sentence tell you? Different food. They were on different islands. Those islands had different types of food. That's all I need to know. Different types of food. So we're on separate islands. We have different types of food. And it tells you, for example, okay, yeah. For example, they had this. Great. But I don't need to know that. All I need to know is that they had different types of food. So what did Darwin observe? Every time I say Darwin, I think of Gumball. So what did Darwin observe about their beaks? Say again? They were suited for their diet. So, what was suited for the diet? Shapes of the beaks, kind of food they lived on. And she said, suited to their diet. So depending on what they ate is the shape of the bird's beaks. And it tells you, okay, so if you have long, thin beaks, you had to reach between rocks to gather insects. If you had thick beaks, you can use those to break open those hard-shelled nuts. Those are details, but not main ideas. All right, next page. All right, talks about, so what? These finches have different shaped beaks. Who cares? But it's actually important. Where does it say why the birds had different beaks? Yep, their environment. So let's shorten that down. Beaks specialized for their environment. How long did this take? Did this happen in a week? A month? Generations. So you know what a generation is, right? It's like you're one generation, your kids will be the next generation. So over many generations, this does not happen overnight. All right, it tells you long ago, these beaks were probably different. Yeah. What happened to the finches that had the beaks that weren't good for eating the diet they had? Like if I was a finch with a long pointed beak and the only thing I had to eat were these long die. So that tells us in the last sentence, poorly suited, finches died out altogether. Proper adaptations to thrive. So this is why we use that phrase, survival of the fittest. Only the finches that had the right kind of beaks for the food that they had in front of them survived. All right. Next paragraph, the first sentence has vocabulary word or phrase in there. What would you pick out as an important word or phrase? Not quite, but I like where you're thinking. Nope, not prominent. Think scientific vocabulary. What type of selection? Natural selection. All right. What do you think the rest of that sentence is? So natural selection is the process by which certain biological traits, blah, blah, blah. That sounds like a definition, does it not? So what I'm going to do, maybe not highlight the whole thing. I'm going to put a couple of what I call bars on the side so that I know that natural selection is an important thing, so I'm going to highlight it. But in that selection that I have marked is the definition. This is the reason why in your textbooks, if you're reading pages out of textbooks and there's bold words, those are called like keywords or vocabulary. Somewhere in the sentence with those bold words is the definition. All right. Natural selection is based on the ideas that animals with specific biological traits well suited to survive an environment will reproduce. So let's shorten that down. If you have specific biological traits well suited to survive, oops, that was horrible highlighting. You will reproduce. That means you will make the babies. Think about it. If you had those finches, the only thing to eat on the islands were those hard shell nuts. So that means that the only birds that are going to be left around to make babies will be the ones that have the beaks that can eat those hard shell nuts. Everybody else is going to die, so they won't be there to make the babies. So eventually all the babies will look like their parents. All right, this means that the population of animals with well-suited biological traits will replace other animals. Pretty soon there will be no other birds on the island except for the ones that can eat those hard shell nuts. All right, that's all I want to know out of that paragraph. I don't want to know anymore. All right. Read the first two sentences. What do you think I need to highlight out of there?
What are you thinking?
Can we do the bar?
Mm-hmm. Where would you put the bar?
First 2 sentences.
And what would you highlight to go with that bar? What word? Evolution. Very good. So I've got my keyword, my evolution, and then the bars indicate that that sentence is important to that bold word. It reads like a definition as well. Evolution, process by which traits inherent to a species of animal change, sometimes grow more specialized environment. That means there's been a change over time. Anything that says, for example, I usually read it, but I don't highlight it. Because it's more details, not main ideas. So we read that already. We're going to keep going. Now, what happens to create change in the genes? In this paragraph, what does it tell us that happens? What happens to create a sudden change? Keontae, you're concentrating on that highlighter an awful lot. You got an answer for us? Keep looking. Harry, you see anything? You see anything? Something that causes a sudden change? Keep looking. What you got? Say again? Okay. Hold off on that, because we're not quite there yet. The whole second part of this paragraph talks about what happens to cause a change. Nope. In general, if you have a single member of the species that undergoes a change, what is that change called? Mutation. It says like the X-Men comics. Not so dramatic though. So, mutation. And the thing about mutations, sometimes we know they're going to occur. Like, some of them are hereditary, which means you can get them from your mother or father. But sometimes they occur randomly. For example, Logan, one of my sons, Logan, has a genetic mutation that causes tumors to grow in his body. Nobody in our family has that mutation. This is a random mutation. When we have a mutation, we get a new ability, something that helps us, whether it's the shape of the beak, whether it's camouflage. Whether it's resistant to pesticides, whatever it is, it's given us a new ability. Sometimes those abilities help us and sometimes it hurts us. But when it helps us, it helps our whole species survive. That's literally all I need to know out of that whole paragraph. The rest of it is an example. Good example because it talks about us. All right, move on to the next paragraph. So in this one, it talks about how insects have adapted, how there's been a mutation. So we're skipping through some of the stuff we don't need, and we're highlighting a single species undergoes a mutation. I'm sorry, single insect undergoes a mutation. Allows them to survive. So if you have a single insect in a species that undergoes a mutation and he becomes resistant to pesticides. Y'all know what pesticides are? Yeah, you spray it like, you'll spray them on like your garden and it keeps the bugs off your fruits and vegetables. But some bugs have become resistant. There's been a mutation and you can spray them all you want, but they're resistant to that spray now because of mutation. So if you have a bug that's resistant to mutations, resistant to pesticides due to mutation, that bug's going to be around. It's going to make babies, and then all its babies won't be affected by the pesticides anymore. So next thing you know, you have a whole generation of bugs eating all your food. All right, you should be on the last page. All right. So if you survive, you are qualified to reproduce. You have the babies. Now we're able to see this mutation because things like insects, they breed very quickly. Some insects only live a day. They are born, they breed, and they die all in 24 hours. When you breed very quickly, you evolve more quickly. However, most genetic mutations takes thousands of years. That's all I need to know out of that paragraph. Depending on the species, it can happen very quickly, but usually, especially in cases like humans, we don't live, breed, and die in 24 hours. We live a long time compared to bugs. So it's going to take us longer to be able to see those changes. Who has heard of antibiotic resistance? You ever gotten antibiotics? Your doctor's like, be sure to take all the antibiotics. Don't just take half of them. You got to take them all. That's because a lot of bacteria that make us sick are mutating and becoming resistant to the antibiotics we're taking. So we need to make sure whenever they give you an antibiotic, they may give you one time and then you go back for the same problem, they give you something else. And that's because whatever you have, the bacteria have mutated. This is the same reason why you have to take a flu shot every year. And it's a different shot every year because the flu shot from last year, the flu virus has mutated. And now it's like, forget your shot, I'm going to make you sick anyway. So you got to get a new shot, unfortunately. All right. This next paragraph is all one big example and tells you about more research on the finches. Skip that whole paragraph. That's great detail, but no main ideas in there. Next paragraph. It talks about why they support the theory of evolution. Okay, there was a drought. Y'all know what a drought is? Where it doesn't rain. So 2 years they did not receive any rain. Can you imagine 2 years of no rain? Not a single drop of rain in 2 years. So plants on the island died. And food decreased. So out of those two sentences, all I need to know is there was a drought, plants died, food decreased. So if you had birds with small beaks, unable to crack open these seeds, so birds with large beaks thrived. Smaller beaks died out. So we summed up that paragraph saying there was a drought, plants died, birds with small beaks could not crack open the large seeds that were left, so they died, birds with large beaks lived. Eventually, the only thing left on the island was birds with large beaks. What do you think would happen if it started to rain and all the large seeds went away and small seeds came back? What do you think would happen to those large beaked birds? They'd probably start to die out, and who would come back? Gradually, birds with smaller beaks would eventually come back. It would take generations. But the birds with the smaller beaks would live to breed, make babies, and next thing you know, island's full of small beaked birds again. All right. The only thing I want you to highlight out of the next paragraph is the very last part. Natural processes which a species reacts to the environment. And this sums up what evolution is. Oops, let me move that up. So, evolution, natural process in which species react to changes in the environment. All right, now I want you to take a minute, and it should only take you a minute. I want you to reread this selection, but only read the parts we highlighted. Skip everything else. When you're done, put up your hand for a second. Let me know you're done. Give me a wave. You don't have to hold it. There's John. So that went by a lot quicker this time, right? Just read the highlighted parts. So when this is going to be kept, I'll tell you what to do with it in just a second. To use instead of taking notes about Charles Darwin, these are your notes. When you study, I don't want you, unless you just love to do it, you do not have to read the whole thing over and over again. I want you to focus on the highlighted parts. We're keeping it as a reference, but as far as studying goes, you're just studying the highlighted parts. What I want you to do with it is, when it's folded, you will notice that you have the back panel, which is blank, right? You're going to put it on your notebook on page, what page are we on, 43? Something like that? Yep, 43. But I want you to put it in the top left corner.
top left corner of your paper.
Oh, jeez. How did we lose the whole hour already? When you are done glue that into your notebook, I want you to cut out one of the pictures of the horses. And you're going to glue it to the bottom right of that same page. Just like that. After you're done gluing those in, you can relax, stretch, shake yourself awake. I'm gonna pass out another reading selection. This is for you to work on. You can work on now if you want. If not, it's due for homework the day after tomorrow. So not Wednesday, but Thursday. Did everybody hear that? So you've got tonight and tomorrow night. Now I want you to do the same thing that we just did with our highlighters. And if you don't have a highlighter, you can borrow one from me. Just let me know you're taking it, because I only have enough for, so many. Or you can always just underline it with a pencil. You don't have to actually use a marker or anything. Listen to what I'm saying. If you're not listening, then that's extra work for you. I only want you to do 1 through 7. Questions on that? I only want you to do 1 through 7. So if you do on 10 because you weren't listening, that's you. Won't hurt you. But I'm only going to grade 1 through 7.